Good evening. This week is Rosh Chodesh Av, and this will take place on Tuesday night, Wednesday. The customs of mourning intensify at this time. Up until now, we just refrain from shaving, barbering, and listening to music and banning weddings. From Rosh Chodesh Av, we include also a prohibition against bathing, with the exception of hygiene, of course, and eating meat. If you have any specific, or drinking wine, if you have any specific questions, particularly if these apply now in this difficult time of COVID, I am available. Please call me, 617-899-9356. All right, let's get into the Parsha. There's a half a verse, 5 words, which really deserves our strict attention. It says, Ve'et Bilam ben Ba'or hargu b'charev. And the evil Bilam was killed by the sword. Why does the Torah have to tell us, to go out of its way to tell us how he was killed? There are myriads of ways of killing someone. The answer is because, as Rashi says, Bilam was a hypocrite. His whole profession was speaking in lofty terms. He said, Yodea dat elyon, I am a man who knows the mind of God. And because of that hypocrisy, he really was a man of the sword. So the Torah goes out of his way to tell us that that's how he got his end. He was killed by the sword. So the message here is avoid hypocrisy, and also to recognize hypocrisy. The Gemara makes a funny comment about Bilam, that when he was on his way to go curse the people of Israel, which in the end were blessings, but en route, his donkey refused to budge, and he started beating the donkey. And the donkey opened his mouth and said in front of all the dignitaries there, "Why are you hitting me? You're such a noble man. You're hitting a poor donkey? I served you all my life. You rode me." And the Gemara Medrash quotes that here's the man who claimed Yodea dat elyon, I know the mind of God. He doesn't even know the mind of his donkey. In history, we have met many such people. Just to give a few examples, I don't have to mention Stalin, who promised, among other things, the great powers that when he would take over the Eastern Bloc, Eastern Europe, he would guarantee all those countries free elections, and they would be able to live according to the highest standards of democracy. And of course, he spoke very high, but he did very low. And even in our own country, the president at that time spoke beautifully, and all the Jews were like Bobby Soxers seeing Elvis Presley for the first time. We loved Roosevelt, but in the end we discovered that he could have done so much more to open the gates of the United States to refugees and to bomb the railroads leading to Auschwitz, and he did no such thing. So we are no strangers to hypocrisy. Unfortunately, though, it is not only the hypocrisy of our enemies. Sometimes our own friends behave in a manner which is not befitting. They speak one way, they behave one way, they make themselves out, they represent themselves in one way, but their behavior is very different. It's a humorous story about the famous Malbim, who Rabbi Moshe Leibish Malbim, he was a famous commentary on the Tanakh, and in one of his congregations, he was the victim of this hypocrisy. And he got up in shul one day, and he says, I noticed that you have an interesting custom in this congregation. You kiss your hands, and you touch the Torah. And I would prefer that you do the opposite. That is, you kiss your hands and touch the Torah, and then you give with your mouths. You say you're going to give, but you never do. I would prefer that you would kiss with your mouths, but give with your hands. So we must learn to be that way as well, just like our great teacher Moshe Rabbeinu, who was Toho Kebaro. His inside equaled and matched his outside. He was not just a speaker, he was a doer. He was not echad bapeh ve'echad balev. He was not one in his heart and another in his mind. The Mishnah in Sanhedrin tells us that when the righteous pass away, God says, Kaleni me roshi, Kaleni me zero'i. Woe to my head, woe to my arms. And perhaps this is a similar idea, that Hashem recognizes that the tzaddikim are not only speaking well, but they're also doing well as well. And how many representatives of other religions throughout the ages have told us that we should turn the other cheek, and yet in their own private little worlds, they are morally depraved. They claim for themselves Da'at Elyon, the knowledge of God, but they don't even have Da'at Behemah, the behavior of animals. So the true Jewish way is Rosh and Zroa. We have to speak well, we have to think well, but we also must do well. Separate them, allow a person to feel that he has fulfilled his duty just by professing highfalutin ethics and morality. Such a person is in danger of becoming a Bilam. So before we profess high ideas, let us commiserate with mankind in their pain and suffering and try to alleviate it, try to enhance their joy. And this is true of the animal world as well. We have many, many, many laws which train us to be sensitive to the pain and suffering of animals. Tsar Balei Chayim. In fact, all the laws of kashrut are very much related to that. We have special ways of slaughtering. The person who slaughters has to be a real Talmud Chacham. He has to be a rabbi. We don't just allow anybody to do this, because the rabbi is expected to show sympathy to the animal world. In the words of my beloved uncle, Rabbi Norman Lamb, the highest eloquence is righteous living. The finest poetry is good deeds. The greatest philosophy is the performance of a mitzvah. the most precious knowledge of God is the sympathy we extend to all his creatures. Shabbat Shalom.